Cars have long been part of the American consciousness. Historically, they have been not only influential but influenced by popular culture, having touched every avenue of media. From the eponymous adverts for Chevrolet and their ilk starting roughly in the late 1940s and reaching their peak in the late 1960s, to Fitzgerald and Kerouac's respective characterization and reliance upon the car's plot device, to films such as Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, the Back to the Future trilogy, or Duel by Steven Spielberg, all radically different stories. Each distinct form of media within the culture industry has at one time relied on cars. Bakersfield, as a microcosm of the United States as a whole, will be the context for our research in order to narrow the study to a manageable size, as well as provide space to explore for depth instead of breadth. The classic car was chosen as our focus for this project due to its current relevance as a pop culture object.
We studied multiple sources for data on the history of the car industry and its relationships with the consumer, namely Automania by Tom McCarthy, The American Automobile by John B. Ray, and Consuming the Car, Anticipation, Use, and Meaning in Contemporary Youth Culture by Eamon Carabine and Brian Longhurst. We also conducted an interview with Andy Texera at Automotive Technical Services, which proved massively helpful.
My name is Andy Texera. My business is Automotive Technical Service. We specialize in the restoration and preservation of classic and antique cars. I've been in business for 20 years. At this location, I have going on 30 years experience in the industry. I started business in the mainstream auto repair, and my former boss was able to book in a 1937 Ford for restoration, and I really was very good at it, and it was very interesting to me. So we started doing more. The next one was a Carnation ice cream truck for Disneyland. And that one was actually in the Electric Light Parade for years. Kern County and the Valley has an interesting dynamic in that we have our own set of cars that we tend to gravitate toward. We're very fortunate that in California the cars don't rust. So we can very easily find a car in very serviceable condition that's 80 years old. Whereas in Wisconsin, you'd be lucky to find one 10 years old that you couldn't see the ground passing by when you're driving. Kern County is very interesting in that El Caminos are only popular in the San Joaquin Valley. Anywhere else in the country, they couldn't sell the darn thing. Same thing goes with big domestic cars from the 60s. Impalas, Caprice Classics, Galaxy 500s, just those monster giant things that trunks for all your friends. They're popular here, even with the higher price of fuel. In Kern County, those giant cars are very popular here.
As Andy said, big steel cars are quite popular despite the high cost of owning and operating them. The abundance of these types of cars suggests a high level of retrievability, illustrating the cultural power of this object as discussed by Michael Schutzen. Cars, especially American muscle cars, have a significant amount of rhetorical force. It is not uncommon for pictures of Mustangs, Camaros, and Dodge Chargers to come to mind when the word car is uttered. Because of its everyday usefulness, the car has become resonant with American life. It is extremely recognizable in society and is often a major set piece in advertisements and forms of entertainment. The institutional retention of the automobile has become so prominent that it is assumed that every American family will have at least one car. Even families with low incomes can generally afford an automobile in today's society, if not a little less flashy than the higher-priced makes and models. The resolution of the automobile is a major focus of this video. Aside from simply using it as a means of conveyance, Americans have made an entire culture out of restoring, modifying, racing, and even showing cars.
What about the demographic do you notice? Especially here in Bakersfield, because we do have a pretty diverse demographic here in Bakersfield. What do you notice, specifically in like the car enthusiast group?
It's really kind of funny. People gravitate toward a specific kind of car. Different people gravitate toward different kinds of cars. And on the retail level that I'm at, you get to see these people in action and how they group themselves together. For example, people who collect Studebakers. They're the nicest bunch of weirdos you've ever met. They are super nice. Studebakers generally are not an attractive car. You either love them or you hate them. But the people that have Studebakers will they will be the people that stop on the side of the road to help you change a tire. They will be the people that will make a car show work for an elementary school when they can't make it work on their own. They're just really nice people. Corvette people are snobs. Porsche people and Packard people are total elitists. They love their cars and they love their machines and they all gravitate together, but if you show up with a Mustang at a Corvette event, you might as well go home, because they're not even going to talk to you.
Classic cars, or those made before 1975, can be seen as not only a mode of transportation, but as a status symbol, means of identity expression, product made for mass consumption, and exemplification of the culture industry. Firstly, the car, prior to the 1970s, was a status symbol expressive of who each individual was, whether a Chevrolet-owning farmer or a Buick-driving wealthy businessman. The car was mass-produced, and thus would be considered part of the mass consumption industry, yet the amount of modifications possible on the classic cars made each individual unit inherently unique. This image shows the car as exemplifying the American dream of the 50s, a home, a happy, smiling family, pets, and of course, a car. The house circa 1950 to 1960 changed to accommodate the growing car industry. As shown, a huge portion of the home was set aside to be the garage. In this way, we can see the cultural diamond at work, with consumers influencing creators to create different items of consumption. Americans bought cars and thus needed a place to store them. Architects designed new homes to accommodate the car, and finally cars themselves were affected, with their overall size, especially their length, decreasing in order to fit into the garage. The car was a demonstration of a white male American culture, though it was, like most ideas, intended to be broadly available as a commodity. The Volkswagen Bug had to be specifically marketed, as it was outside of every ideal of a car. Instead of smooth and sleek, it was round and large. Instead of being quiet, the engine seemed almost intentionally deafening. And most importantly, it was German during the 1950s. As Ad Age's Bob Garfield wrote in his analysis of the 100 greatest ad campaigns, quote, Beetle ownership allowed you to show off that you didn't have to show off, end quote. This industry was a major force behind the growth of early Bakersfield. From the conversion of the Famoso airstrip to the drag racing arena, to the boost of the local economy by car sales in the 50s and 60s, car culture massively expanded Bakersfield as a whole.
I don't think economics has as much to do with it as the eclectic nature of the car itself.
Okay.
Studebakers are very different. They were very advanced for their time. They were shunned at their time. And now a Studebaker can handle itself on a modern road much better than, say, a Pontiac or a Buick of the same era. If you were to take a Studebaker and throw it through an intersection on a left-hand turn real hard, it would do it. It wouldn't have any problem. If you took an old 55 Buick and threw it through that same intersection, it may make it through the intersection, but the tires are going to cry the whole way, and everything in the car is going to be over on one side, because they just don't handle. Absolutely. Why else would we put wings on a car? There's no chance that 59 Cadillac is ever leaving the ground. It's fashion at this point. These cars are not reliable anymore. When you take a car that's 50 years old, refurbished or not, it's not going to be a 100% reliable car. All of its components are very old.
The car industry changed according to major events of the time. A major example of this was the name change of SS Jaguar to simply Jaguar in 1945, a direct result of the Nazi SS party and public opinion thereof. Thus, the consumers indirectly affected the industry. Cars are even changing rapidly before this generation's eyes, with hybrid and electric cars flooding the market such as Prius and the Tesla. As Tom McCarthy says in his book Automania, quote, all of the automobile's environmental impacts occurred in a larger context, shaped by consumers as much as, and sometimes more than, producers. The automakers have had extraordinary power to shape the nature and degree of the automobile's environmental impact. Yet consumer choices have also influenced the nature and degree of environmental impact. Buyers and sellers have a codependent relationship, and they bear joint responsibility for the side effects of their behavior. End quote. In terms of classic cars, while environmental impact was not even considered at the time of their creation, gas mileage and efficiency were certainly key factors.
Well, it's changed a lot. The dynamic changes all the time. 10 years ago, we were painting cars and street rods purple. And thank God we're not doing that anymore. Turquoise was a big color back when. We're not doing any of that stuff anymore. Well, those wild colors are all gone. We're starting to follow what Detroit is doing with their cars. A little more subdued colors, no more chrome anywhere. Detroit does it because it's cheap, but the market follows them because it's new and updated, and you know, it's a great way to freshen an old design. I'm sure it relates to society's view toward flashy people at the time. Now, not everybody wants to hang out with Rodney Dangerfield all the time. You don't want to stand next to the guy in the orange suit all the time. Those styles come and go. So I think it's just cyclical. Now, the big push in the industry is toward auto drive, cars that drive themselves. Once that starts, the dynamic will change in ways we cannot even imagine, because we're no longer drivers, we're occupants. And we're no longer having to be responsible for our actions behind the wheel. So litigation is going to change. The way we perceive motoring is going to change. It's changing now with anti-lock brakes and self-parking and all of these things that take the skill away from the driver and put it onto the car. Different skills are very different. There's a reason they didn't put cup holders in cars back when you were kids. It's because it took both hands and both feet to drive the car. And there's a lot of pride involved in your ability to handle a 3,000 plus pound machine careening down the road a mile every minute. Ultimately, the single family automobile days are numbered. It won't happen in my lifetime, but it very well may happen in yours. The days of individual transportation are drawing to a close. Internal combustion it's dirty, it's expensive, and since the 1960s we've been plugging away at the 5 important gases that come out of a car.
This article proved useful for research on cars in terms of sociological analysis. On page 187, the article explains the commodification of cars, which plays into the capitalistic approach of a car as a pop culture object. The use value of a car can be interpreted in many ways, for example, transportation, aesthetics, and even shelter. Since its invention, the ubiquity of the car has been contributed to by mass media and the assembly line. Imagination is also worth mentioning in terms of cars, such as the contradictory nature of consumption with the insatiable desire to want the newer, better car. Cars have been so influential in our lives, and as such, they have their set connotations. Cars can tie in with accidents, the law, freedom, and all other sorts of meanings. The car has integrated itself to be a major part of society.
Favorite of all time, has to be the Duesenberg SSJ close couple convertible. Very rare. It was they called it the 20 grand. Duesenberg, you bought the chassis, and then a coach builder built the body custom for you. You could buy 20 or so Model Ts, or at that time Model A's, for what it would cost to buy one Duesenberg.